The night was colder than usual, and the city seemed to breathe in silence. Streetlights flickered weakly, painting the cracked pavement with pools of amber light. Inside a small roadside diner, half empty, half forgotten, a young father sat in a corner booth, his little boy asleep against his shoulder. His clothes were simple, worn but clean. The steam from his coffee curled upward, disappearing into the dim light, as if carrying away everything he didn't have the strength to say aloud. He had been coming to this diner for weeks, always around the same time, ordering the same cheap meal, a cup of coffee and pancakes for his son. But tonight, something in the air felt heavier, different. It wasn't just the weariness of another long day. It was her. The waitress. The one who never smiled. Her name tag read, Clara. She moved quietly, mechanically, refilling cups and wiping tables long after the customers had gone. Her face was calm, yet her eyes carried a storm she never let anyone see. There was something haunting about her silence, something that made the father's heart ache without even knowing why. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to I Am Kindness Corner. Every story here carries a heartbeat, a reminder that humanity still lives in the smallest acts of care. The father's name was Ethan. A carpenter by trade, he had lost his wife 2 years earlier in an accident that tore his world apart. Since then, he'd been raising his little boy, Noah, on his own. Some days were better than others, but most days were just survival. Yet in the quiet corners of his struggle, this diner had become his safe place, a pause from reality. Every time Ethan came, Clara would serve him the same way, politely, but with the emotional distance of someone who had built invisible walls around her soul. Her movements were precise, her words few. And though her face was young, her eyes carried the exhaustion of a lifetime. Ethan noticed she never smiled, not even once. Not when customers joked. Not when a child laughed. Not even when her coworker tried to lighten the mood. He wondered about her story. Everyone had one, and some were written in silence. That night, after paying the bill, he hesitated before leaving. The diner was nearly empty now. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet, and the clock ticked in slow rhythm. Ethan looked at her one last time, standing behind the counter, lost in thought. Then, against his better judgment, he asked softly, "Clara, can I ask you something?" She looked up, surprised. No one ever called her by name. He continued, his voice gentle. "Why don't you ever smile?" There was no accusation in his tone, only genuine curiosity. But for a second, she froze, like a fragile glass about to crack. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, her mask slipped. She turned away quickly, pretending to wipe the counter. Ethan immediately regretted asking. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to." She shook her head. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's just, some people forget how to." Her words hit him harder than he expected. Forget how to smile. The phrase lingered in his chest like an echo. Before he could respond, she excused herself and disappeared into the back kitchen, leaving him with a silence that felt heavier than before. Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about the way she said those words gnawed at him. He'd seen pain before, in hospital rooms, in mirrors, in his son's questions about why mommy wasn't coming back. But there was something about Clara's quiet grief that felt painfully familiar. A week later, he returned to the diner again. Clara was there, as always, moving with that same distant calm. This time, Ethan brought a small paper bag with him. Inside it was a simple wooden toy car, something he had carved himself. When she came to take his order, Noah held up the toy, smiling proudly. "It's for you," Noah said. "Daddy made it." Clara blinked, caught off guard. "For me?" The little boy nodded, his eyes shining. "You look sad." "Daddy says smiles are gifts." For a moment, time stopped. Clara's lips parted, and a tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She crouched down to Noah's height, touching the little toy gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." Ethan watched silently, his heart tightening. That was the first time he'd ever seen her show emotion, a flicker of life behind the walls she'd built. After that night, Clara began to talk a little more. Nothing deep, just small things, about the weather, about how Noah reminded her of someone she once knew. Each word was a crack of light in a room long kept dark. Then one evening, when the diner was empty again, she sat across from Ethan after her shift. The lights were dim, and outside, rain tapped gently on the windows. She held the toy car in her hand, its wooden edges worn smooth from being carried too often. "I used to smile all the time," she began quietly. "I was a teacher. I loved kids. My husband and I were saving for a small house. Everything felt perfect. But life doesn't ask before it takes." Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened, the kind of listening that feels like an embrace. Clara's eyes filled as she continued. 2 years ago, my husband was driving home with our little girl after picking her up from school. There was an accident. A drunk driver. They both, her voice broke, trembling under the weight of memory. They didn't make it. Since that day, I couldn't smile. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't remember how. Every time I tried, it felt like betrayal. Like I was erasing them by moving on. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. He understood. He truly understood. He wanted to reach across the table, to tell her that grief doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love deeply enough to break. He took a deep breath, his own eyes glistening. "Clara," he said softly, "I lost my wife too. My son was just a baby then. For the longest time, I blamed myself for every smile I tried to have after that. But one night, my boy asked me why I looked sad even when he was trying to make me laugh. I realized then, our loved ones don't want our hearts buried with them. They want us to live. To smile. For them." Clara's tears flowed freely now. For the first time in 2 years, someone had spoken the words her heart needed. That night, they sat there in silence, two souls stitched together by shared loss. And in that silence, something shifted. Not happiness, not yet, but understanding. The kind that heals quietly. Days turned into weeks, and every evening Ethan and Noah would visit the diner. Slowly, Clara began to change. She laughed softly at Noah's silly jokes. She started humming to the old jukebox tunes. And one evening, when Noah handed her a flower he picked from the sidewalk, she smiled. A small, trembling smile, but real. It was the kind of smile that carries both sorrow and survival, the kind born from healing. Ethan saw it and felt a warmth bloom inside him, a light he hadn't felt in years. Sometimes life doesn't fix you completely, it just gives you someone who helps you remember how to feel again. But life isn't a perfect fairy tale. One night, Ethan walked into the diner only to find it closed early. A handwritten note was taped to the glass door. "Dear friends, thank you for every cup of coffee and every kind word. I've decided to leave the city and start teaching again. This place helped me remember who I was. With love, Clara." Ethan stood there for a long time, the note trembling in his hands. He smiled faintly, tears in his eyes. She was healing. She was moving forward. And that, he thought, was the most beautiful ending of all. Weeks later, as he tucked Noah into bed, the boy asked, "Daddy, do you think Miss Clara smiles now?" Ethan kissed his forehead gently. "I think she does, buddy. And maybe somewhere, she's teaching other people how to smile again too." He turned off the light, the wooden toy car still sitting on the bedside table, a reminder that sometimes the smallest kindness can change a life. If this story touched your heart even a little, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to I Am Kindness Corner. Your support helps us spread real stories of hope and humanity around the world. Speech Balloon Special Request. Tell us in the comments, what's one act of kindness that changed your life? Your story might inspire someone else to smile again. And as the screen fades to black, a soft line appears.